Welcome or welcome back to What's the Obsession. Thanks so much for being here with us. Please take a moment to click like and subscribe. If you'd like to join the community of people supporting Micah Miller's family on their search for justice for Micah, please go to justiceformicah.com where you can make a donation to the family to help cover their legal funds. As we know, it's going to be a long journey for them and they need our support. We will be with you all the way. Fitz News is credited with doing an interview with Micah Miller's sister, and Micah Miller's sister talks about the moments, the days, the hours that the family had to jump into action after they learned about their daughter's tragic death. The link to Fitz News is in the description box.
We didn't have any time at all to figure out what happened or even just emotionally let it kind of sink in. We were forced to immediately go into that fight mode because just it's our just DNA, it's our who we are, and when it comes to fight or flight, we definitely fight. So we found out about midnight, the night that she passed away, from John Paul saying, good job, Francis family.
Hold up, wait a minute. Right off the bat, guys, can you even believe the nerve of this man?
He said, this is what happens when you encourage someone to get divorced and not take their medication.
On the evening of Micah Miller's death, and apparently into the next day, J.P. Miller made a big spectacle of himself, calling numerous, lots and lots of friends and family members and acquaintances of Micah and breaking the news to them in very bizarre ways, time and time again. This is what Micah's best friend Charlotte has to say.
So that was the night of her death at around 10:30 at night. They had found out within a few hours of that message, and that was the text that he decided to send them. At 2 a.m., when I found out from another friend, I was just in total disbelief and thought there was just some terrible misunderstanding. So I immediately called her sisters, and they were all together and confirmed everything. But they sent me that message. They said, "This is how JP is handling it."
And we all knew that was just a lie. Like everything he said, like all 3 points, was just completely a lie, and we have so much proof against it. So we just were like, we just ignore him at this point because we're just used to his deception. So we didn't even buy into it. And within a few hours, he had texted about 100 people that she had passed away that night, and it just kind of went crazy from there, where people are reaching out to us, posting all over social media. Like the next day, he told his whole entire congregation what had happened before even, I mean, our cousins and aunts and uncles, like Micah's family that doesn't even live in Myrtle Beach because we're not from here, didn't even know the news yet. And he was already telling all these people who don't even know who she is or thought they knew her, that they thought they knew her. But
Next soundbite is in response to a Fit News question about the age. How young was Micah when J.P. Miller was essentially alienating Micah from her natural family?
All started when she turned about 16 or so, is when that actually started getting out of hand. He convinced her to move away from our family and live with people from the church, saying our family is not good Christians, not good for her. So he just convinced her that we weren't good for her. And as the years went on, she would come and talk to us and then get out of our lives. And like, it kind of flip-flopped like every other year, if we were on good speaking terms or not, depending on what John Paul's narrative was. If you didn't speak positively about John Paul in any way, you are not allowed to be near Micah whatsoever. And that goes for anyone, even her sister. Our whole family, we would speak on what we thought was not okay, what was controlling, it was brainwashing came up every single week in our family. That word came up every single week on like, what do we do? And it came to the point where we didn't even say anything for probably a year. We literally just let her do whatever she was going to do because we couldn't control it anyway. So we just had to be like, well, I really love my sister and I want to see her. So I have to pretend like I'm okay with going to dinner with John Paul. And I would go to dinner with my sister. He had to be there.
What Micah's sister has to say next about her not having any symptoms or signs of mental health issues prior to meeting JP is something that's been echoed time and time again from many people who knew Micah well.
Micah never had any mental health problems until she married John Paul in 2017. She never was on any medication her whole life. None of my siblings are on medication. We just have naturally so much energy that we all have our own small businesses. We are all very just contributors to the community. We get involved in our church and our business and friends and everything. We don't need medication to make us wake up in the morning in a good mood and energetic. And we use that energy for good. And I mean, the only thing my family can really come up with is that he was just jealous of what Micah, how like, he was always known for being successful, and Micah was also a very successful and liked person. And John Paul's used to being the center of attention. He's used to getting all of the good graces from everybody. People are just honestly too scared to go against him. But my family, we are like the only people who aren't scared to speak out of the truth since they got married, even before that.
Right.
My family started going to his church whenever we moved to Myrtle Beach in 2010. And our parents saw his narcissistic behavior on the stage. They took our family from the church. And that's whenever John Paul started isolating Micah, is when our family left the church. And then, I mean, our divide with John Paul and our problems with him and our family, he's tried to divide our family since we had left the church. And this is like 24 years. If anyone knows us from the other side, like, we're not even related to him. We just had to put up with him because our sister was one of his victims. So anytime we basically wanted to just have family time or anything like that, he always had to be involved. So if we wanted Micah in our family, then we had to do whatever they kind of said to get through the holidays and stuff. But even when, like, the first time he put Micah in the hospital, our family was like, this is like not like her. She's not mentally unstable. She's perfectly fine. She's healthy. She was 23, 24, 25, one of those three, when she's supposedly having a bipolar episode for the first time, which none of us had seen signs for before. Which, I mean, everything behind that was just John Paul had been taking probably since he was in his older teens, early 20s, he started taking medication for his mental health. He's been on schizophrenia medication for over 20 years.
So that was a bit of a big reveal right there from Micah's sister, saying that John Paul Miller has been on schizophrenia medication for over 20 years. So we do know that he is about 45 years old, so that would make perfect sense. We also know that some of these conditions, like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and some other mental ailments, tend to have a typical onset age of late teens to early adulthood. This is a very common onset time for some of these mental imbalances. Some of you who have been with this channel for a while know that I am a behavioral therapist. Since its inception, one of my focuses on this channel is human behavior and mental health, being able to identify indicators of families or individuals that are teetering on a state of crisis, recognizing the signs of mental imbalances that leads down a slippery slope of emotional and mental instability that can leave a person in a really bad place in life, allows us to help other people and help ourselves the best we can. Learning how to recognize when we need to show up with big love and big support for someone when they are on the edge of something deep and dark, is so important. It can save lives. It can certainly save quality of lives. It can save relationships.
There's videos that are coming out because people had seen his behavior a long time ago, 20 years ago, and that's when they started seeing signs, and they never posted, shared anything because they were scared of what he was going to do.
Typical characteristic of an abuser: intimidation to all of those around them.
That knows of him, if they see something that he's done wrong, they're all like scared for their life, scared for their business. If they own a business, like multiple people really love our family throughout this whole thing. They own businesses, and they were silent, anonymous givers to our family during this whole thing. And they literally said, I have to stay anonymous because I own a business and I have to protect myself.
Now, in the case of JP Miller, his situation goes beyond mental illness. There is a very real thug quality to JP Miller and to the company that he keeps. There are people who are close to him in the church, who are acquaintances of his in his community through the church, who are absolutely terrified to speak up with their voices connected to their stories. People are reporting this time and time again. I've come across it myself.
Well, even the article that was just written, John Paul's first wife, Allie, was trying to get all of those young females that were underage to speak up about what John Paul had done to them, and they were all too scared. So without a victim speaking up, how is the authority supposed to prosecute someone or have him have accountability for what he's done?
Micah Miller's sister makes a point of and affirms something that has been said about JP Miller, that the elders in the church couldn't possibly even remove him from his position on the pulpit, even if they wanted to with all of their hearts and might, because he owns the church and he owns the land that the church sits on. He owns everything having to do with that church. He is, in essence, the dictator of Solid Rock Baptist Church. And JP played these material power games in all aspects of his life. Check this out. According to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina News, there's some interesting financials when it comes to John Paul Miller. According to the report, JPM allegedly purchased a home for $34,500 in November of 2020. Then on December 5th of 2023, he allegedly sold the home to Solid Rock Ministries for $169,000. But Miller owns Solid Rock Ministries and all of its holdings. The house is supposedly still in the church's name, and it's valued at $365,000 plus change. This post here says, maybe someone who understands a little more can explain in the comments. Is this part of what the FBI is looking at? Well, it looks like this is certainly possibly tax fraud, as I'm sure that the church is running as a non-for-profit, and he is also probably hiding assets in the event of a divorce, so he won't have to split the value of the home with, well, it was Micah Miller that he was married to on December 15th, 2023. At Market Commons.
Not only that, is he owns the ground that the church is built on, the dirt, every chair, every person that's on his payroll, he owns them.
So let's consider the stronghold of power that this puny, weak little being, JP Miller, has over people. He has the material upper hand. He owns the church. He owns everything in the church. He owns the property that the church sits on. He holds the purse strings, and if somebody in the church or if the church wants to do something that costs money, JP Miller and JP Miller alone decide whether it is yay or nay. JP Miller also holds on to something that is more powerful than a banknote. He holds on to the trust and the faith that the people in his congregation have invested not only in him, but in God, in the Lord, in their spiritual lives, in their connection to the ever after, in their connection to that which is wholesome and good and illuminating in their lives and in this world. JP has taken advantage of who knows how many people's faith, their deepest faith, the faith that they intend to put into God, Him, or itself. It's no mystery to understand how J.P. Miller had such a stronghold on his first wife, Allie, or on his second wife, Micah Miller, or anyone else in his life, for that matter.
Well, the whole time she was actually ready. The past few months, she was ready to leave him and be strong and do whatever it took. And she even still then was like, don't tell anybody what the real, like, as everyone would put it to today's terms, juicy details of why she's divorcing him. She even said, she was like, I want to protect the Christian church. Every single person that has found out what he's done make comments like, that's why I don't go to church. That's why I'm not a believer in God and all these things. And that's the last thing that Micah would want, is everyone saying it's all the Christians, it's all the pastors, which it's not. Specific location. And even then, she knew a lot of people at the church were good people and she didn't want to hurt them. She would rather endure the abuse alone, or with only like her close family knowing what's going on. And a lot of people have in our family's been wanting to share with the world who he really is for a long time. And I just came to the, I guess, epiphany last week. Was I actually told my boyfriend, I was like, I think Micah had to go through all of this, and I think it had to come to this. I really believe that if she didn't pass away and this much attention happening, then he would never have been held accountable for any of his actions. He would just live like nothing ever happened.
Micah's sister talks about how Micah was doing after she finally made a break from J.P. Miller, which was clearly a very challenging move for Micah to make, a huge, monumental move that she made in her life.
The first few days were the worst. She actually stayed with me, and he had her last straw was him putting her into the mental hospital against her will. The police, he lied to the counselors at the mental facility. He ran in there and said, my wife's trying to kill herself, you need to come get her, which wasn't the truth. She actually ran away from him. She was trying to get away from him. And he has shown patterns of throughout their relationship, whenever she just needed a break because of all this abuse she's going to, she would literally just ask for an hour to hang out with just her siblings without him. And he would take that as them getting too much space away from each other. So, I mean, he would always have a tracker on her phone. He would always, in like this later times, like the current times, he always had a tracker on her car. But back then, before all this was happening, he would always use a location on her phone. So he's been tracking her for years. And me and Micah would just be at lunch and he would just randomly show up. Or I would meet Micah for lunch, and then she would just look down and be like, he just shut off my phone. He just shut off my cards. He completely can freeze her whole entire life. If she doesn't do what he says, he literally has control to her whole life from his cell phone.
And he used that control?
Yeah, that was just like every few months. I witnessed personally one of those things happening where he would just randomly show up out of nowhere, and we're like, where did he come from? And Mike is like, he has a location on my phone. We'll just be sitting at lunch and she'd be like, oh my gosh, we had the worst fight today, and why can't we just go through a normal, like a healthy relationship does have fights, but you get through them. And he always calls someone to mediate their fight and tell them basically that everything bad that Micah had done, and just flipped the script and the story, and Micah was wrong every time. Friends, I mean, Charlotte Corn, the one that started done for those, he included her in a lot of text threads, her husband as well, just shaming, basically trying to embarrass Micah in the little fights that they would have, just so that she would stop. Like he's basically ruthless until he gets what he wants. He will, everyone that knows him, he will send 100 people a text in 5 minutes. Or text the same person 500 texts in 1 minute.
Oh my gosh, my heart aches for Micah. Now, these things that she's describing are absolutely typical signs of abuse, typical actions, behaviors of an abuser, of an extreme, ruthless abuser in a relationship. Now, what she's talking about there is very reminiscent of some stories that we would hear that JP would not accept if Micah said no to sex, that he had a stupid sexual appetite and wanted her to be ready whenever, he pleased. And if she said no, or she wasn't giving him the right signals, or wasn't in the mood, or just wasn't happening, that he would pour cold water on her at night when she was trying to sleep, or blast loud music in her ears until she finally woke up and gave in. I mean, these are like hardcore interrogation tactics used to get people to tell the truth in, some pretty rough and ruthless situations. And JP Miller was using these tactics on his own wife and the people around him.
Just so that you give in to whatever he's saying for you to do, so you can just get away from the problem. Yeah. I mean, we'll be sitting at lunch and she'll be like, he's threatening to throw all my stuff on the lawn if I don't come home right now. And we'll just be in the middle of lunch. And I'm like, it's a beautiful summer day. Can I just not sit and have lunch with my sister? And no, they got into a fight. So she had to get home that second or all of her belongings were going to be on the lawn. It's not just one time. That was many times.
Micah's sister tells us what she thinks about Micah's last day on Earth, April 27th, 2024.
I think our family is so disappointed with the Robeson County Sheriff's Office for not properly doing an investigation. It had all of the signs that someone would have if they did commit suicide, almost too perfectly. And they wanted it. It seems to us, it's our belief that it only took them like a week to get together all the information of John Paul's alibi and where Micah was that day. They didn't interview anybody properly from that site. More and more people are coming out saying that they were there at the scene and they weren't questioned. Nobody, even the kayaker or fisherman that found her belongings, he was talked to for about a few minutes and said, okay, thanks, goodbye. It just came out in a video that when one of the employees from that state park, they saw him leaving in a truck and with his boat behind him whenever he left with Micah's stuff. And when he came to bring it back, he had went to the store and then came back in a different car, like a white car. One from the police have questioned that. No one even swabbed his hands for any residue, anything. His story from what I've seen on the internet, his story and other people interviewing him, other people are going to interview him other than the police because everyone's saying, what happened that day, right? The same question, what happened that day? The proper interviews just weren't done. The fisherman's story of how he found Micah and what he did that day, from their interviews and everything online, everybody can see it. It's changed 2 or 3 times. There's a lot of people saying that they heard 2 gunshots go off. He's claiming he only heard 1. Like all over the place, and the police should have done a better job. That the kayaker found her with a log on top of her.
Micah's sister talks about Lumber River State Park and having no ties to that area. It was so remote, and it was just a very confusing situation. Listen to what she has to say about that.
The day we saw all their evidence on why they thought it was suicide, they basically showed us snips and clips of things going on and stuff. They even showed us the video of her car at the gas station. Was like, well, she's here about 20 minutes. Do you just want to skip to the next slide? And it was just so quick. They wanted it to just be done with. And it was pretty obvious that they just wanted to get it over with, because they were getting, the day that everyone found out, it seems like the whole world is just in an uproar, because people are finally coming out of the woodwork, and people are finally saying, this is a video I had 20 years ago. And it's just kind of building that case of who his character really is and not who he just pretends to be for 45 minutes on stage.
Right.
And I mean, since the day that we found out, we knew it wasn't her, because she was never mentally unstable before she met him. That's not even in her vocabulary. Failure is not in her vocabulary. Just letting yourself get that far, like that low. She was making sure that the lady that she lived with at the time, it was a nice older lady. It was a more like a grandma figure to her. She kind of felt like she needed that. And John Paul, and she had been to the church Solid Rock for a while. She loved her friends and community there. She doesn't have family here. She's from New York. And when she took Micah in, John Paul kicked her out of the church and told her not to come back, just for the fact that she let Micah live with her during all this. That's the place where he would trespass, actually, because they're in a gated community. He would trespass and put the razor blades in her tire, or even in the beginning, he would harass her by putting flowers on her car. He would just leave stuff on her doorstep for Diana to find, which is the elderly lady. She's like 85 or something. So she was also being mentally put through all this abuse as well as Micah. She was seeing it firsthand. And all the allegations of John Paul saying that Micah wasn't taking her medicine, Micah knew he would say that. So she had Diana watch her every day and say, John Paul's going to say in these cases that I am mentally unstable because I'm not on my medication. Please watch me. She would sometimes, to us in the very beginning, before she moved in with Diana, someone watch me. I'm over here. And we were to the point where, Micah, we see you take your medicine. We thought it was we thought it was like not ridiculous, but it was like, okay, we see you, right? We didn't know we would go this far. We never thought it could be us. Like our family has never experienced a death in the family. Both of our grandparents are still alive. This is very new to us.
Right.
So we didn't know we didn't know what to do. So that's what my boyfriend, Ryan Williams, had set up the GoFundMe, because he's experienced, unfortunately, a lot of loss in his life. As a young child, a lot of important people in his life has passed away. So he knew that we would need financial help. He knew we would need a food train. He had all of his friends bringing us food over before our family even got to town. And even in the first few days, it was just the GoFundMe was just set up on his Facebook account for all of his friends to give that don't even know Micah. And then when it got so huge, that's whenever we had to wow, oh my gosh, we need to make this bigger. We need to, obviously, we need more help. We're going to take the little crumbs. Honestly, we were just going to fight this without any help. We didn't know we needed help, but Ryan knew we did.
You have to have an awareness of the complexity of the legal situation that Micah Miller's family is facing. They are in probate court right now. There is family court. There is civil court where they are going to sue John Paul Miller civilly, I believe. I'm sure that they will. And then hopefully and ideally, if justice does its job, there's going to be criminal court. Who knows how many charges and who knows how many people are connected to any of these charges, these hypothetical charges in all of these various courts. So by the way, that reminds me, please, if you can, go visit justiceformicah.com. The family is needing to raise funds for the legal support that's going to be needed to find justice for Micah, and you can help out there if you wish. Watch the Obsession donated half of its revenue for the last week in May, and we contributed almost $650 to Justice for Micah, and I'm so very proud to say that, and we will do it again if they need the money.
Need help. Well, John Paul didn't give us a choice.
Right.
He immediately, the day after she passed, or the following morning, the next business day, I'll say, after she passed, he already went to his attorneys to get the divorce dropped, which raises so much. He and because we found that out, we already and it's so sad to even know this. Micah had already appointed our sister Sierra over her email, her passwords to it, her Facebook account. Micah had been keeping track of all of her abuse, wrote every affidavit that someone has given her, or their testimony against what they've seen. For the lawyer, she had a huge binder already prepared. She had all kinds of journals. She was anticipating something bad happening to her, and she had told Sierra that, and that's why she said, if anything happens to me, she had told one of our family members that she reported John Paul to the IRS the week that she passed away. The church, or not John Paul, but the church. Well, the church is John Paul, so
right.
Either one. Whenever you say Solid Rock, it's John Paul. All of the money is all intermingled. And it was said that he was moving around all his assets into his oldest son's name or his friends' names. So it didn't look like he had as much as he had while they were going through this divorce. So when all that was happening, she just started going to work. She did a lot of work for the lawyer she had, and that's what also doesn't make sense. She had just paid her lawyer that we have $5,000 3 days prior to her passing. Why would she do that? Why would she have, and that's actually donated money. Like someone from I guess it was someone from the church, I want to say, a really nice lady from the church who wanted her to get away from him so bad. She gave Micah $5,000 as the retainer fee for her lawyer the week that she had passed. So no one borrows money to just end their life. So, and also no one tells people for a long time now. No one tells people if there was ever a bullet in my head, it was John Paul, it wasn't me. She said those exact words to about 10 to 15 people. And they all were messaging us when everything happened, when the world found out. All these people are messaging us. We don't even know who they are. They're not even connected in any way. They might have known Micah in different period times of her life. And they all said, who do we need to tell this? Do we need to tell the authorities? Who do we go to? Them, in good faith, to the investigators at Robeson County. We sent all that stuff to them. They told us that it was, if they had interviewed everybody that we told them was important on this, that it basically would take too long. They only wanted to interview 2 of our family members. And we also obviously have a big family, but not to mention, did they only enter 2 of our family members? They obviously didn't interview the people that found her belongings, or it's just one thing after another.
This is what Micah's sister had to say when asked if she thinks there will be an outside investigation into the circumstances of Micah's death.
I think it got so much attention that they were forced. I think other authorities were forced to be like, this is a really important case. A lot of people had been wanting to send John Paul and the church all of the financial mess, all of John Paul's allegations from 20 years ago that he was addicted to prostitutes, underage females, just all the abuse that Micah had went through. A lot of people wanted to report him for that, and Micah told them all no. For the record, Micah told everybody, no, do not do anything. God will take care of it.
When asked if Micah's belongings from that day are still with the authorities, this is Micah's sister's response.
That paperwork was given to other authorities.
Okay. So, and you have a court date.
I didn't see it exchange hands,
Okay.
but I was told. But they're not handing over her death investigation. From what I was told, the Robeson County has the jurisdiction over it.
The family will be going to court on Micah's behalf this coming Wednesday. Like, maybe it's today, maybe it's tomorrow, but we're talking June 5th, 2024. And here's why.
This is the last thing that Micah had paid her attorney for, was for all of their assets to be placed. Micah had to give hers, he would have to give his, that was just the first court date that was set to get their divorce started. And when everything happened, our sister Sierra had to go to court and file for just to basically step in her shoes on where she last left. What was her last move? Micah obviously gave Sierra all of her passwords, everything that she needed for the case, because she, like I said earlier, she had some kind of feeling that just in case something happens to me, someone needs to know all this stuff. Even at the last, even like my brother was saying, whenever you leave, someone like John Paul had left like the tire deflators. Well, there's like a weird name for it. I don't even know what it is. My brother would know, but he left tire deflating devices on her car, on her tires. So whenever a police had asked us, do you think John Paul had threatened Micah in any way, like for her life? And my brother said, absolutely. If someone left a tire deflation device on my car and I'm going 60 miles an hour down the road and one of them goes out, that's a car pile up that could get multiple people injured. And no one took it seriously. All the police that she reported it to, they never took her seriously. They just wrote down what she said. And I believe there might have been pictures on Micah's phone of all the devices, the razors and everything. My brother was actually in the car with Micah whenever one of the PIs that he hired to follow her around was following her around. A secondhand, just firsthand witnessing. It's not just Micah witnessing this behavior and these allegations against him. It's not just Micah saying it. Our family's witnessed it for years.
While Micah Miller's story is a new story to all of us, the family has been going through this drama, through this saga, through this life with Micah for years.
It almost is like we were kind of numb to, okay, John Paul did this again. John Paul put her in the freaking hospital again. Or we can't talk to Micah this week because we spoke about her being brainwashed and it's pretty obvious. Everyone knows it around us. What do we do? It was like a weekly thing for years. So, Micah specifically said that John Paul tried to tear up mine and Micah's relationship because it was one of the strongest relationships that she's had in the last few years, other than her great friends, of course, she already had. But I mean, nothing can break a bond like sisters. And I've said a lot of times, like, your siblings are your built-in best friends. So you're not only related to this person, you really enjoy hanging out with them every day because they're just like you. You know, that's who best friends always hang out, because they're alike. So me and Micah worked out together like 3 to 4 times a week at least. We went to lunch or dinner at least once a week. We did a lot of just adventures together. We went skydiving together. Everyone else was too chicken to do it, but me and Micah just went up there, and she was the first one to jump out. She was so ready. She just jumped out screaming, this is the best thing she's ever done.
Micah's sister touches on Micah's core of inspiration, her mission in Africa with children from Africa.
It was something that she created. It was something of hers. It was finally something that she could do for God, for other people, that didn't have to do with the church, because I believe that John Paul had just trained her to only be good at the church, or only be good for him, his assistant, his stepmom to his kids. Everything good that she ever did, he wanted it to be attached to her. So she finally came up with her own mission work, and she was so successful. She was knocking on doors, selling Krispy Kreme donuts. She was going to dealerships. She used to sell cars at Honda. She would go there and other dealerships and just sell hundreds of boxes of donuts just to raise money for these kids in Africa and Kenya. And I think one of the most devastating things that could have happened to her in her life was that John Paul took that all away from her.
Yeah.
Whenever,
I saw an email that he wrote her that he was using it as a weapon.
Well, that's just his MO. That's just what he does. He uses something that's really important to you and leverages it against you.
Micah's sister gives some clarity to the time when John Paul Miller forced her to go into that mental facility against her will, and all kinds of crazy things happened while she was in there, and then spun out of control afterwards.
So, unfortunately, after she had been brought to the mental hospital under her own will, she realized, and she was cleared, by the way. She was cleared by every psychiatric person in that place. And even Faith Green is the person at that hospital that signed for her to be in, and was one of also John Paul's victims in a way. He was basically telling her, she's sick, she needs help. And I mean, that's just what John Paul does. He forces someone to believe what he wants them to believe. And so she was one of those people. And at the end of that weekend where she was examined, and I'm pretty sure Faith Green apologized for it and said that she should have never been in there. Everyone cleared her. She's completely sane. Whenever she was in that hospital, that's whenever John Paul stole her car, her wallet, her purse, everything that she had that she thought she was hers, now in John Paul's eyes was marital property, even her purse. So whenever she got out, our family was trying, even while she was in, she actually sent my brother to her house, go get the keys to my car, go get my purse, go get like a bag of clothes for me, please. When I get out of here, I'm obviously not going home. And my brother was turned away by John Paul, saying everything in this house is marital property. I'm not giving you anything. And even when she got out, he still didn't give her anything. She was using our phones to communicate with people. My brother had to bring her to the DMV. She had to get a whole new driver's license. She had to start her life over from scratch.
The clothes on her back, what she walked out of the hospital with, that's what she started over with.
So that old lady, Diana, that she had lived with, John Paul started moving all of her stuff to Diana's house while she was still in mental hospital. But only a few things. It was like only it's crazy that I'm even like, everything kind of comes back as we talk. But my mom had mentioned while we were going through all Micah's stuff, obviously, my mom was like, where is all of her nice clothes? I only see like sweatpants, t-shirts. And we were like, this is just what John Paul let her have. All of her nice things. She actually, while they were still, while she was getting away from him, after everything happened, she had purchased an ice bath machine. She was like really into the health benefits, and she actually convinced me to do it. It's like 40 degrees in this ice bath. It's really crazy. But that was also being taken out of her card every single month, even though she wasn't able to use it. She asked John Paul for it, and he actually had his friend, Mark Kaufman, post it on his Facebook for sale. And I confronted Mark, and I'm like, why are you posting all this stuff? And he just says, everything John Paul's ever done bad, I tell him he shouldn't do it, but he still is by his side. After all that has came out, about what he's done, he still has a few set of people who will follow and do whatever he says. Why that is, I could only imagine he has dirt on them, and that's the only reason why someone would ever have a friend that does this much damage. Why would you even want your name associated with someone this horrible? They just, I think it's another Micah. It's another brainwashed person by John Paul that is just going with the flow.
Being manipulated.
People that wanted to leave the church, that had raised an eyebrow to a lot of things happening, they would go to the elders of the church or John Paul and say, like, what's going on here? We can see people are talking, people are leaving the church, what's going on? And these people came out on Facebook and was saying they had every kind of proof and every kind of comeback as to why and who was responsible. They said Micah was mentally unstable and that her family was the cause of the division. And that's what everyone was told that came up. And they were either given the choice to believe what they're saying or just leave the church. Like, you've never done anything for this place, never helped out, never served, never given your time, your effort, your energy, your money. Just leave. Like, I've never met you. I've never known you, unless you believe what I tell you and you keep doing what you're doing silently.
Her sister shares Micah's vision for her mission in Africa, but with ownership of Micah rather than the Church of John Paul Miller.
Yeah, I'm gonna start a whole new charity name with the same, respects, with the same ideas, just in a different name, because she couldn't get any of that stuff back.
And you guys,
from what Tanya had told us, actually, while Micah was in the hospital, whenever he took everything over, Africa, we're in communication with the pastor in Kenya, and he said he's never received any money from John Paul.
Interesting.
After Micah had been taken out of the picture, but he was still on stage saying he's still raising money for it. There is a sermon, it's on some kind of YouTube, someone's Facebook page, where he's saying that he's admitting that he bought a plane and he's to do mission work or whatever he's doing. It's the same sermon where he said he just wants to find a hot wife that loves Jesus. He also said that he was still taking after the mission that Micah had left. Whenever he had the police forcibly take her to the mental hospital and never gave her anything back, he told all the church that Micah had just up and left. And don't talk to her family. Every time something like this situation happens, he put all I wonder if this was about 2 years ago, he put all of Micah's friends in a group chat, I think the first time she went into the hospital, and said, don't trust any of Micah's sisters. All of her friends were in a group chat saying, don't trust the family and don't talk to them either. So every time he was isolating Micah in a facility or with someone from the church, he was putting everyone in group chats with each other, obviously with not Micah in it. He was saying, don't trust her family and don't talk to them. So with her charity being taken away, super devastating to her. She was going to overcome that. From what we all understood, she was going to start a new one. And we're going to have to find like a new church that needs help. And honestly, with the donations that everyone's giving to the GoFund, they're helping us be able to fight John Paul in court. He actually sent another paperwork to our lawyers saying that he wants to take us to court, to the probate court, like something we had already done. Like, we already had gotten another probate lawyer involved other than our civil lawyer. So again, he wants us to bill another probate lawyer for something else, to fight for something else of Micah's, whatever it may be. He just wants to keep us hurting financially because he thinks that's where he can get us. he knows that none of us have $5,000 weekly to give to a lawyer. So, and unfortunately, the church does. So he's just using the church's money, or however he's getting this financial backing, just to drain, trying to drain us that way. But luckily, we're like super blessed with everybody that has been like reaching out to us. It's our GoFund account has been shared to thousands of people. Everyone has been so great. The whole family is like completely overwhelmed with how much support we're getting. Even if it isn't financially, people just prepped us a meal, gave us like 3 cases of water for like the 25 family members that came to town for her memorial. We're really grateful that everyone came together. People that didn't even know Micah, they're just their daughter or son, I don't remember which one, but the family that had just started the Justice for Micah t-shirts, I met with them, and they were like, just so you know, like, we just saw Micah like one time in passing, and our child was just very fond of them. Micah had left a really good impression on our child. And we knew that something was wrong with John Paul from a long time ago, and we just wanted to help you guys out. And it's just, they're selling t-shirts from their small business. Like, they have a screen printing company here locally in Myrtle Beach. And even they're opening up an ice cream store nearby too soon. And they want to have a flavor of ice cream and color of purple for Micah. And all the donations from that ice cream are going to give to the family as well.
Oh, that is wonderful.
And I'm like, all because Micah was nice to their child. Actually, a lot of people, I'm not sure who started it, but they were petitioning for Micah's law. There's going to be a name. They're petitioning for a law to be named after her for anyone going through anything similar to what she's going through, to be able to have a law backing why this should never happen again. Any kind of signs of all of this duress, the police should be accountable for just brushing her off.
Right.
There's dozens of police reports involving Micah and Paul over these past few, and nothing was ever done because they're married.
An important question is, why was nothing ever done?
Only that, but how much time is important. It's super time sensitive, especially for someone like John Paul, who gets things done immediately whenever he knows he's in the wrong, or could reap repercussions for what his actions, or any situation where he would be held accountable for what he did. He tries to cover it up as fast as possible.
Micah's sister shares what happened when John Paul showed up at Micah's apartment on April 30th to try to take some things from Micah's apartment, her own belongings.
The manager of that office yelled in his face and said, "Get out of here, you complete psychopath." Diana, this poor 85-year-old lady, is scared for her life. She had just saw Micah that morning. I personally was getting really just worried randomly. I thought people were following me. I was starting to get irritable and like closing all my curtains and stuff. I didn't even feel safe in my home sometimes. Any kind of window that didn't have a cover on it now has a cover on it. But then I just realized that that's just one of John Paul's things, is just to intimidate and scare people. And I'm like, I fell for it for like a few days after she passed. And I was like, what am I thinking? That's not true. God's got me, so those fears definitely have subsided, but it's our belief that he had her cremated as soon as possible, so that there was no second opinion, there was no chance of a second opinion.
Apparently, John Paul Miller was trying to prevent the family from viewing Micah Miller's body at the funeral home. Gotta wonder why this is.
Our family, whenever we had seen her body at the funeral home, That morning we tried, whenever she arrived that morning, our whole family, we went up there and we asked to see her from the owner of the funeral home. And he said, John Paul said no. John Paul says to come back at 12 o'clock. And that's whenever he'll be there. And the funeral home owner told us the complete opposite and said, no, you guys need to come at 2 o'clock whenever he's not even here. Because he knows a few days after her passing is when we saw her, I think that Wednesday or Thursday, but it was already all over the news and everything. So he knew the situation. So he was telling us to come at 2, and John Paul was telling us to come at 12. And the funeral home owner was like, no, and hung up the phone immediately. Because we're like, well, John Paul's telling us to come at 12. You're telling us to come at 2. When can we see our sister? And he's like, no, absolutely not. And he hung up the phone real fast and called John Paul and said, stop it. Not only did John Paul try to get us to go there at the same time as him, he was requesting a list of every person that was going to be there to see her. For what reason, we can only speculate that he wanted to have some kind of paperwork set up for all of us.
Micah's sisters asked about the interview that her father did, where he shared with the world that there was bruising and scrapes on Micah's hands and arms.
I was going to get there, but I thought it was pretty important to tell people that we had, even after she passed, John Paul still had control over her, which is super important.
Yeah.
That even her own family couldn't even see her. Whenever the funeral, she was in the other room, and legally, like, the funeral home owner was so awesome. He was calling up his lawyer, like, what can I do to let this family see or their daughter, sister? And there was nothing that they could do, because John Paul and her were still married, even though they had filed for divorce, separation, everything. And that's what I think that Micah's law is gonna do, is to help all of these other victims not still be a victim even after they pass away. So, in saying that, we had to come back. We had to leave and come back. And in order to see her, our parents, per John Paul, our parents had to sign that she would be cremated before we were allowed to see her. So either we don't see her and we don't get her ashes, because he was going to figure out a way to get her cremated anyways, is what he was saying. So either sign it and do it easily so you can see her, or just put up a fight and you don't get to see her anyway. So our parents' hands were tied. It was the hardest thing that my mom said, it was the hardest thing that she's ever done. And her cries, I can still hear her cries in my ears she was just crying for probably 10 to 15 minutes, because she didn't even physically have the strength to even sign that paperwork. Before everyone could see her, we were all just sitting in the lobby waiting for my mom to have enough strength to go to the office and sign the paperwork that she was to be cremated.
It's like he's controlling her and torturing you guys.
Absolutely. And that's what he gets pleasure from that. Why else would he do it? Why else would he still put us through this? Why else would he still? And there's so much proof that they were getting separated. He was sending her nasty emails, and one of them's even online. He literally emailed Micah, "You disgust me," all kinds of stuff. He wanted nothing to do with her. He has another girlfriend. Like, that's why it's getting so much attention, because he wanted nothing to do with her. Even though they weren't fully divorced, they were just separated. He was openly dating a girl named Susie, as well as Micah was getting messages from people seeing him out with different females every week. He went with different female somewhere out, and as well as constantly dating this one girl. So it's like he was still playing the field as well as preaching every single Sunday, and putting Micah through all this and our family. And so he's allowed to openly date people. But whenever it comes to all this situation, he still had control. He still wears his wedding ring. Like, he's still married to her. A lot of, like, chilling things that we're not okay with. But we did see her body, and there was bruising all over her hands and her arms. And whenever we talked to the medical examiner, he said, "What bruises?" He said, when I saw her, there were no bruises. And so I said, is there any possible way, whenever she was taken out of the water, are there any room for any kind of error in that? Are there bruises from people who grabbed her from the water? The examiners, he said, it's not possible for the body to bruise after the heart has stopped. So those bruises were on her before she was in the water. So they don't have any photographs of the bruises. They don't have any idea what we're talking about. And all of our family is looking at each other while we're finally able to try to maybe mourn this instead of fighting. We couldn't even mourn. We, at that moment, even seeing her there, had to still fight. We were taking videos and pictures of her body to get proof before she was cremated, because no one else was going to do that but us. I couldn't take the pictures or videos. Luckily our siblings had done that. And I've just been saying during this whole time, like all my siblings, we have 5 sisters and 1 brother, everyone took charge of at least one task, and everyone individually just started doing it. Like I was in charge of the meal train, and I just took that role without even anyone asking, because I know people need to be fed. That's just what I'm good at. I'm good at coordinating. That's what I do for a living.
Right.
With my company, I coordinate people. So that's what I'm good at. All of our strengths just like kind of really came out during all of this. Our sister Sierra and our brother Nate are really on the investigative side of all this stuff, because if anyone needed an advocate, like Sierra and Nate are the ones. So they're the ones that were able to take the pictures and videos. And my dad actually, he took a picture of her, and it was, I've never heard my dad sound that way. Like I've never heard, I've never heard a human express that much pain, like vocally. I've never heard that before. Taking a picture of her in this little box they had put her in. Literally, it was a cardboard box with blankets on it. But Sierra, I'm like, they had like a little pew set up so you can like kneel to kind of see her. But I'm kneeling there, and I'm looking over where kind of Micah's head is, and Sierra's has her hands on Micah's hands, trying to make sure it's visible to take the pictures and stuff. And she's crying, and she's like, I can't believe we can't even mourn her right now. We literally have to get all this evidence. This is so messed up. She just was like, this is so not right. This is so not right. Like I've never touched a hand that didn't have life to it. And it was the hardest thing that I've had to do. Definitely. And our family is doing everything we can to make sure that happens. And that's why the help of the whole community around us and everybody online that's never even met us or her, they're donating, they're sending food, all this kind of stuff, because a phrase that came up during her memorial from a pastor in the area that's close to us, they made a t-shirt with Micah and all the kids in Kenya, and it says Micah lives on, because everyone that she's touched, they're never going to forget her. And all of the support we're getting from the GoFund and however else people are giving us financial support, not only does it help us win these cases because we have money to keep fighting, it's that all of her, we're basically essentially fighting for her estate. So if she has anything that is worth giving to like women's shelters, my sister Destiny wants to start a charity in Micah's name for women's shelters, because that was really important to Micah. They want to start a clothing drive starting on the day on the 5th of our court is when we're gonna I think they're making a poster right now, but it's going to be posted this week that in Micah's name, we're going to have a food drive or a clothing drive for all the women's shelters in the area of women that need help. And then whatever is left from her estate is going to go to her charity that she was trying to start in Kenya or anywhere of those surrounding cities that really need help that Micah visited or have met before. Or even if Micah has never met them before, they definitely have heard of her now from people in Kenya, for sure, because their kids' faces might be on the T-shirt that we are all wearing. So we're definitely planning on doing that. All of our families planning on going to Kenya to start that charity as soon as all this is over. As soon as God allows us to win this case and be able to keep fighting for her, that's our plan. We're all going to go to Kenya with whatever. We're going to just keep raising. We're going to keep raising until we can get there.
Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to visit justiceformicah.com to support this amazing family. May we find justice for Micah. And we are going to be hearing from Micah Miller's father, Michael Francis. Now, this is an interview that he did. It was on a Rumble channel. It wasn't on one of those mainstream media news channels like I know we've seen him a lot on Ashley Banfield and the Law and Crime Network. This is a little bit different. The channel that did the interview that we are going to be listening to part of is the David Zublik channel. And that channel is not on YouTube, but rather it can be found on Rumble. He has almost 60,000 subscribers. And it looks like he's affiliated. We see in the bottom right-hand corner, there's an icon that says the Awake Nation. I'm not exactly sure what that is. I'm trying to figure it out. But I just want to say in this interview, Michael Francis seems a lot more comfortable and laid back than he does in interviews that he has done with mainstream news media. And he reveals a lot more about what he knows about Micah and John Paul's relationship in this interview. It's extremely interesting. Guys, make sure to watch this video through the whole duration. There are 5 or 6 points that we haven't heard Michael Francis talk about yet that everyone's been wanting to know about, or a couple things that we didn't even know to ask about that he reveals in this interview. It's a really good one, really informative. Things that he talks about that I personally didn't know anything about was that he discusses J.P. Miller's younger years and when JP and Micah first met. And he does say it's when she was 14, not when she was 10. And he discusses how JP Miller had Micah report her mother to Child Protective Services. Just going to say up front that it is abundantly clear that JP Miller was grooming Micah.
The more we tried to get Micah to spend time with us and get her to talk about this, the more he tried to keep her away from us, to the point of here's a big revelation about his character was he coached Micah into calling Child Protective Services on her mother, and just division. He's always trying to keep her away. He set up places for her to stay with friends in the church and such. And I eventually was able to go there. I was living in Virginia at the time, and I was able to go there and sign with Child Protective Services for her to be in people that I knew, and different things like that. And then she ended up coming and staying with me for a school term in Virginia. And, I was just shocked at how much someone can be changed, how much someone can go from very free thinking, but in a Christian way, positive way and such, and be very well founded in the word, very well trained up, and then end up over time yielding. And he knew that Micah was somebody who understood authority. He knew that she was going to respond in a biblical way to authority, but he twisted it and used it for his advantage, and basically had her snowed where she didn't realize what all she was involved with, and ultimately, because she started fighting back and coming out of this in the last recent years, he wouldn't let her go into board meetings from the church. He wouldn't let her go to business meetings, and and she demanded to see the bylaws of the church. And then we discovered there was 2 different sets, and the one that everybody thought was accurate was never filed, and Reverend Randall came into a meeting holding up the actual bylaws and saying, this is what it is and this is how we're doing it. And so the elders of the church were basically just pawns. They had no idea. Everything they voted on was came down to the decision of Reverend Randall or John Paul.
Micah's dad gives us some insight into the assets and wealth that JP owned through the church and the way he manipulated that wealth to manipulate people.
And he had sole ownership of everything. He was constantly moving properties around and vehicles around, up to 29 vehicles, and just the bonkers type of business deals in the background. And Micah was totally oblivious of it because he wouldn't let her in on it because he knew she would be blowing the whistle on it. She knew she would respond because even though he had, forced her and compressed her in her life, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they're older, they want to depart. That started coming out in her, and this righteous indignation started rising up within her and within us. And she, as she came and stayed with us and stayed with her sister and such in Kansas with Destiny, the shells started peeling away, and she started realizing more and more how much she had been brainwashed.
Yes, we call that MK Ultra.
Yeah, how manipulative people can be, and especially people in position of authority, like a pastor and that sort of thing.
I mean, his character, like from the pulpit, from the platform, whatever, bragging. I haven't driven the speed limit a day in my life, and just different things. Like I've said before, he always says in a sermon at some point something that he actually will do or has already done or is doing. And I don't know if that's something that God does that kind of squeezes it out of him, and we're supposed to pay attention.
Michael talks about the eerie things that John Paul Miller spoke about in his sermons from the pulpit and the eerie foreshadowing that cast upon this tragedy that happened.
But as was revealed in this recent video, that he had literally said, Micah said after this statement that loyalty was his currency. And regardless of his actions, he expected his congregation to be loyal. And he literally said in a sermon, would you be loyal to someone who was a felon? Would you be loyal to someone who was convicted of murder? And here we are.
Micah Miller's father goes into greater detail than I've heard him before on how exactly JP groomed Micah over the years.
Now, can you tell us about how Micah came to know him? Because I understand she had been groomed for about 10 years since she was 14.
Yeah.
Did he also preside over her wedding?
Yes. She met John Paul when she was 14. It wasn't 10. That was a mistake. Whatever. 2014. I'm sorry. She was 14. And they met at the church. She was in the youth group. And she ended up marrying. She left from my place in Virginia. She left and ended up getting married not too much longer when she was 18 to a great guy who was good buddy with John Paul. And but of course, he was under his influence as well. And he had him doing things separate from Micah, so that even though they were both active in the church, a lot of times, unless they were literally on the platform singing and he played drums, then they were doing different portions of ministry. And he was able to spend even more time with Micah alone as she got old enough to be like a secretary, old enough to, she ended up working his media for him and doing media designs and such. And so he literally, actually, even from the beginning, even though he presided over their wedding, he started dividing them. And he told me himself, okay, let me back that up. He told Micah, and then I heard from her. And anyway, okay, the thing is when she asked him, John Paul, when did you actually fall in love with me? He told her, when I saw you walking down the aisle with Jeremy. And from that point, it was on. And
when did you start babysitting his children, Michael?
A few years before that, when he had her call on the family, which was totally bogus. Everybody was fine. John Paul orchestrated that. He's a narrative controller, and he always develops the narrative in his thinking ahead of time before taking action, so he knows the next steps before the other people do. Well, when she was separated from the family and before she got married, she was like 16, even when the family was still there. From probably 15 to 16. She was babysitting for him. Okay, so was that the cause? Do you think that an affair happened then before she got married? And because I mean, people ask that, right? Because that would be kind of going along the lines with grooming and such. I really don't. I mean, the family, we all agree that it doesn't seem to be that was the case, because or if anything occurred, Micah was forgiving enough to not say anything about it. And so we have no reason or evidence to think that anything illegal was going on, except that he was grooming her.
Now, did you get an opportunity to look at the divorce papers of the first wife, in which there were allegations that he was that he had a sexual addiction? He was addicted to prostitutes and pornography.
Absolutely, yes. And Micah even confirmed that by saying, and this is so sad because she didn't even tell me until this year, until literally like a few months ago, because like I said, you know, she was trained by him to keep everything covered. He constantly would say during sermons, we need to forgive each other. We need to not hold grudges. We need to not whatever. But yet he would use that information later to hold someone under pressure to do some bidding for him.
Now, Michael Francis goes into something that I'm sure was very difficult for a father to talk about. He gives some specifics on the sexual proclivities and deviancies that he was exposing Micah to and wanting Micah to take part in.
She said, Dad, he had me in the car. We would be driving after dinner, and he would just say, hey, let's go get a prostitute. Just like nonchalant, no big deal.
You would, like, say that to her? Like,
yeah,
did he want her involved in a threesome?
He wanted some kind of a threesome?
Absolutely. He would get someone in the car, and okay, let me back this up too, because this is an important thing to say. John Paul uses things and of course twists the narrative. He used her remarks to say she's crazy because she made a comment saying, if I'm pregnant at this time, it could be a black baby. And he said, that's just so dumb. That doesn't make any sense at all. She's crazy. Well, he had sex in front of her with a black guy because she didn't want to have anything to do with it. And then he admitted in their area and such, and for his pleasure. And because Micah didn't want to participate at that point, she was just shocked. And so she was just thinking there's, that could be possible.
We get a really good idea that regardless of whatever kind of abuse that J.P. Miller was exposing poor Micah Miller to, he was always using that abuse as well to manipulate her into thinking there was something wrong with her.
Why she said that? Not because she's crazy, because he submitted her to that. He demanded it of her. And that there was multiple occasions of this happening.
I'm so sorry, Micah.
With various people, various prostitutes.
I'm like at tears right now.
It's just, yeah, I was shocked, and I just consoled her that nobody should go through that, Micah. That's ridiculous. This is all the more reason why you've got to move out, and you've got to go stay with Destiny. Come to Texas, because I moved to Texas. That's where my parents are. Come stay with me. And so she did for a bit, and the more and more she was away, the more and more she started revealing these kind of things.
And so there you are right there, the way that her father describes it. Micah Miller was exhibiting textbook signs of abuse. She's away from her abuser. She starts to reveal things. She starts to move away from that abuse. It's so sad that she couldn't get away from it completely. Michael Francis talks about his family being musically inclined and Micah Miller's musical gift, and how the testosterone shots that J.P. Miller forced her to have for his sexual pleasure were starting to ruin her God-given beautiful talent of singing.
Did she record?
She recorded some things, and I've got something that she recorded while she was with me in Texas. And here's one thing that's sad as an aside. He forced her to get injections of testosterone so she could keep up with his sex drive. And
of testosterone?
Yes, and it damaged her vocal cords.
Oh my God, Michael.
She couldn't sing normally because her voice started dropping, and it got raspy. And she was so devastated, and she couldn't do what God blessed her to do. He was manipulating her gifting so he could have pleasure more than was normal, more than was healthy. And he would force her to do things that he would say earn his good graces by performing these acts with prostitutes and such, that she was highly unacceptable behavior for her. She knew better. She knew it was just all wrong.
Michael Francis is yet another person to talk about JP's strange notifications about Micah's death after her death. And then, of course, he blames it on the family.
And then, of course, following up, he sent a text message to myself and my son, and said that she had passed. And then he sent he sent a group message to my family saying, "Good job, you guys didn't let her do this and that, and didn't help her with."
So he was blaming you and the rest of the family. Okay,
of course, not, "Hey guys, I can't believe this. Micah has passed. It's so sad. It's so terrible." No, he went right to the blame narrative like he always does, because nothing is his responsibility. And he began saying, you didn't let her do her meds, you didn't help her this and that. And then we're just like, you are so off backwards. You're just lying to our faces. We never told her don't take your meds. We said follow what your doctor says.
Now, there is a whole lot of information in what Michael Francis is about to say next. First of all, he confirms for what I believe the first time is that the surgery that J.P. Miller forced Micah to have was breast augmentation surgery. He talks about how out of it she was after that surgery and that the surgeon used a ridiculous amount of anesthesia on her. You're just going to have to listen to what he says here. And then he also goes on to say that it was at this time after her breast augmentation surgery, which was right before they got married, that Micah was diagnosed with, I guess, bipolar disorder for the first time when she was prescribed the lithium. So this was right at the beginning of their marriage, just before they got married.
We never told her don't take your meds. We said follow what your doctor says. The only thing I was, said at a certain point was you don't probably need lithium. You probably need something less than that, if anything, because she was not diagnosed with anything until she was out of it because of anesthesia and numbing medication from the surgery.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. She started taking medications after some sort of surgery?
Yes. Okay, well, as you stated earlier, he's a sex addict. He involved her with prostitution, etc. Well, I mean, ultimately, you could say he wanted a Barbie doll kind of wife. So he convinced her to have breast augmentation, which she didn't care about. I mean, she thought, okay, well, maybe it'll make me be a little more feminine for him or whatever. But she was super active. She didn't, she was built in a way where she could climb and jump and run and do things, and she didn't need large breasts, kind of doing what they do. So, but he, convinced her to do it. And he also seems to have convinced the anesthesiologist and whoever else, the doctor himself, to over-medicate her because he told them that, oh, well, she's terrified that she'll wake up during the surgery. So be sure to give her plenty of anesthesia. And
maybe he was hoping she wouldn't survive the surgery.
No, I think I have no idea. No, he wanted her to survive because he wanted her to be his wife. It's just that he over-medicated her. They did. That surgeon was barred from practice and had to shut his practice down. The nurses said they had never seen anybody get so much numbing medication in her chest. They're to quote them, they said they used an entire container of numbing agent in her. She was high for days.
And in response to this crisis that Micah was going through, what did her loving husband or husband-to-be do? Of course, he put her in the hospital. He admitted her into a psychiatric hospital for the first time.
What did he do in response? Put her in the hospital. She's crazy. It's like, dude, it can take up to a year for that to subside from that kind of damage. Okay. I've heard testimonies from other people about that.
And then he had her put on some sort of like antidepressant medication.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds.
Yes,
okay.
That's when he put her on actually lithium. At that point, as far as I know, that's when he had her admitted for the first time, and it was between when they got married. Well, see, they had a secret wedding supposedly because he convinced her that if you since there was infidelity, if they were to get married, it would help cover that up. It would cover it, which is totally not biblical, of course. You can't do that. You can't cover up something like that just by doing some other action. Just doesn't even matter what it is. That is not what you do. And so they had a secret wedding, and he put her in the hospital, and I went with him and visited because I was in the area. And I went up there and visited her with him, and when she came out, though, it was immediately time for the actual wedding. The ceremony that they had. And I mean, Micah said she didn't even remember the wedding. She was so built up.
Wow.
She couldn't even really get a handle on the process of it. Like I was going to walk her down the aisle and do all this. And when the door opened up and everybody stood up, she just took off walking. She didn't wait for me. And so I walked behind her and, we did everything kind of on the fly because Micah was she was sedated. She was drugged.
Do you think he was also drugging her on the side?
Oh, it's very possible. I mean, if he's going to give her shots of testosterone, what else was he injecting with that? What else was going on? I mean, yes. Okay. And so backing up literally about the music part, she came and recorded it at my house with her voice not doing so well. And I'm working on that to release that as a fundraiser as well with some music on a CD and online release. I'm sorry to be all over the place, but there's just so much.
That's all right. That's all right. We're gonna continue your story as long as you want to come on and share it. We'll keep booking you for your story. I just need to say that this is so horrific that off camera I just wept, and I probably will continue to weep for Micah and for the awful things that happened to her. And I thank you, Michael, for sharing this. It's important.
Me myself as well. I mean, when my son told me that, I immediately just started straightening up the house a little bit because of a situation going on there for the use of it and such while I'm away. and grabbed all my stuff and just jumped in the car and took off, from Texas to South Carolina, and just, had a lot of moments with God and with my thoughts, and just cried out and had to pull over sometimes because it was not safe for me to be driving. It's just terrible, terrible, terrible.
Yeah, to reiterate something that Penny said, I know you've been interviewed on a few other programs. Unlike those shows, however, with your permission, and if you want to do it, we'd like to have you back several times, because there's a lot more to be said about this, and we don't want to make this a one and done. Like, okay, well, he's a newsmaker. No, that's not how we feel about you. When we heard the story, we said this is something that needs to be investigated. So we'd like you to come on a regular basis and talk to us about this, express your feelings, be part of our trauma triage team, and to help you to heal. I mean, you'll never be completely healed, but anything we can do to help you and your family is what we want to do.
I think I appreciate that, and I'd be happy to. It is nice actually to go to either more frequent or a little bit longer, material, because there is so many details.
Well, there's some good news. Michael Francis wants to talk, and I think it's probably therapeutic for him to talk. I can't imagine what he's going through, and our hearts go out to him and Micah's sister and her brother and all of her loved ones. But it sounds like from what he's saying here that he is very interested in telling his story and telling Micah's story and getting to the bottom of this and finding the truth. And it seems like he is a good champion for Micah. I think he is going to get to the bottom of this. I do believe that he is. Now, here's more on some of the suspicious elements of when JP called the family and reported that Micah had passed away and that she had taken her own life.
So after you found out she passed away, and did your son, was your son the one that said it was allegedly suicide, or how did you find out that she allegedly killed herself?
John Paul, he said through his texting, before the police report was done, before investigation was even started, he already pushed the narrative that she did it to herself. And we didn't want to believe it, and immediately just sounded off. And how can you say that if you don't even know? You're not, were you there? Are you a witness? That's the only way he would have known. It's just if he knew something behind the scenes, because there was nothing released yet. So he was.
Why did she?
A great question is asked of Michael here, and he goes into talking about why Micah would say, if something happens to me, just know that it was JP who did it.
Michael, why did she say time and time again that if I'm found dead, that it was John Paul? Was it John Paul? Is that his name, John Paul? That it was John Paul that did it, JP that did it.
Yeah, he had several guns. He had a gun safe, and he's a felon. Don't know how that works. Hiding whatever. Is he hiding them? Whatever. And he would not give her the combination to the safe. She had previously had a weapon, and he locked it she got one, and then he locked it in the safe and wouldn't let her have the combination. He kept things from her, like as if he was going to traffic her. Ultimately, he had everything.
He was trafficking her.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. So he was violent. They had typical marriage, stuff where she would be mad as well, and domestic aggression. But she became scared of him. She was trying to help him calm down. One time he was on the bed, laying there, and he had his laptop and his phone, and he was just always just doing stuff. And she thought, well, you're distressed. You need to calm down. Let's talk about this. Let's pray about this. And
Micah's dad goes on to talk about the sheer physical abuse that JP imposed on poor sweet Micah Miller.
And she thought, well, you're distressed. You need to calm down. Let's talk about this. Let's pray about this. And she reached to help move his laptop, and he throat punched her. And she had
he was physically abusive to her as well.
Right. He was more aggressive than we would know, but she admitted at that point that he had done things that was very aggressive towards her. And and thankfully she was trained. She was very athletic, and she was on her feet, and he was on the bed. So thankfully he barely, as soon as his hand hit, she was moving backwards at the same time. But she knew that at some point he might not stop. He would get up in her face and just, fake punch her, get right up in her face and do that kind of thing. And, nobody should have to live under that.
Another great question. Michael Francis talks about that weird story that JP told about laying with her 4 times and trying to raise her from the dead. What's up with that? Well, take a listen.
How you treat anybody, even if you're angry, you just can't do that kind of thing. You've got to walk away. But he convinced her to be loyal and put her in fear for her life.
Well, this is the classic symptom of a narcissist. So if nothing else, I mean, not only was he a sex addict, but obviously he was manipulating her and gaslighting her, it sounds like, through the process of narcissistic behavior.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's his motto. His mode is loyalty and control the narrative. And whatever I say is what it is. And if anybody disagrees, too bad.
Now, he's also had some kind of a breakdown, which was, I wouldn't even play that on our show, where he was laying down in the grass and mumbling some crap.
Yeah, I saw that last night.
And then he also said that
he's the victim too. Oh.
Right, he's a victim. And then he also said that he went and visited her body 4 times at the morgue and tried to raise her from the dead. What
was that?
What that is too is, according to the coroner who was on site, he did not do that. According to the coroner, he's hid over in the corner by the trash can and didn't really even engage in this stuff that he's saying. I mean, not even close at all. And they didn't say it was multiple times. They said it was once. So again, he's going to steer the narrative to whatever he wants. But they said no. They have
basically a pathological liar.
Right. They had cameras. They have cameras in there when someone's viewing or whatever, and plus they're in the area, then they can see in there. And they said that didn't happen.
Mr. Miller talks about there not being an autopsy done and that being against the family's wishes.
Now, what is the FBI actually investigating? I've been told that they're not investigating the death, which actually they should. Is that true?
Oh, they should, definitely. We're pleading with them, please. If any of you guys see this, please do it. Check into her.
Are they investigating more for the financial aspect of this?
I can't respond on that. I'm not going to at liberty to say what all they're doing. I'm just pleading that they do, more. I'm pleading that they please, check into this. Do some combing, because you will find some connections. You will find some, if nothing else, the influence that drove her to that.
And why was the body cremated so quickly?
Good question. Because he wanted to. We did not want to. We wanted her to be buried. So if anything, other evidence came to light or some kind of connection was made, she could be exhumed and re-examined. Because unbeknownst to us, there was not an autopsy, and there was only a blood alcohol test done. In North Carolina, they said that they have plenty of material they have enough sample material to do multiple tests for a long time. So we said, well, we need to move that forward. And we ended up filling paperwork out on the spot after that briefing to do a full toxicology report, because they're either lazy, lackadaisical. If the law says they don't have to, if the law says here's what you do, they do the minimum. And that's a problem in the whole world right now, strongly in the U.S. and strongly in this state, obviously South Carolina. The minimum is all they do. They don't take initiative to do more. If there's any sign of potential wrongness, they should have done the toxicology, full spectrum, and they should have done the.
Now, also, he admitted to stalking her and slashing her tires. Is that correct? Or deflating her tires?
Yeah. I'm trying to back up just a little bit, because autopsy is what I was trying to say. I couldn't even get the word out.
It's all right.
And we were shocked, actually. I'll get to that if you can hold it. That we were shocked that they didn't do an autopsy and be an issue, and that she should be checked. And I asked if there was water in her lungs, and they said, well, we don't know because we didn't check that. And that's when we realized they didn't do an autopsy. And then they said, well, typically what happens if someone, with a wound like that, there probably wouldn't be any water, because I was like, what do you mean? Well, probably. And then, he said about the released information. Well, we assumed you already knew that we were going to rule this a suicide. So we're sorry we didn't let you know, and we let it out to the public first. And I was like, okay, again, you're really going to say assumed? You're literally using probably and assumed and maybe and I think. What an easy job to be able to just halfway do whatever and just say it's this. And they weren't very happy with our aggressiveness towards, like, hey, we need more answers than this.
Well, that's too bad that they weren't.
Exactly. And most of them cooperated just fine. And there was some of them were, they were fine. It's just that they just didn't do the exceptional job. Excellence. If you're in law enforcement, it's not just a cool gig where you get to carry a gun. You have to be excellent. You have to be honorable. And just a shame. And if you're a coroner, it's okay to say unknown, undetermined death. You don't have to make a decision. Don't let law enforcement push you to make a decision. If you're not sure, just say undetermined, and then they can dig more and figure out and whatever. So he forced us to do the cremation. He made us he said he would not let us see her at all at first. Initially, he said, you're not going to see her at all. And all of us are saying, like, what is wrong with you? How do you expect us to grieve for the loss of our sibling and our child without seeing her? And I think he already knew that we were going to, that it could end up being that we would figure out something, because why wouldn't you let us see her? Well, so we kept on him. He did some paperwork real fast, and poor Angelita was just sobbing and sobbing because she wanted to bury her and then exhume her later after this stuff came out and get further testing. But he said, nope, you can't see her unless you sign these. And then, you know, she did want to be cremated according to what he said, but the lawyers have been digging to find if there's any will that actually said that. And so he forced it, he pushed it, we signed, and I'd like to have the ashes tested. I've heard of cases where ashes were tested and chemicals were found that should not be there in a typical person's remains. So I'm requesting that be done. And
what did you see when you had the body at the funeral? What did you see?
At first, I just thought that doesn't look like her at all. You know, because of the drastic pressure from that type of wound. It was hard to tell which. I mean, the wound area, entry and exit, looked almost identical. It was very difficult because we, poor Sierra said, this is just so unfair. Why are we having to do this investigation? Why are these people not doing their jobs? You know, everybody was distraught. You know, I was extremely furious. We saw bruising on our hands immediately. And immediately we just said, we've got to take pictures of this. We've got to document this because nobody said anything about this. And then when we talked to the coroner about it, they said, what bruises? We didn't see anything. And they said, so we said, oh, do you want to see them? And boom, red flush face, like, oh my gosh, showed them pictures. Look at her hands. They're bruised. Does that look like a bruising? Yeah. Does that look like scratches? Yes. And, oh, but maybe that could have happened after the fact or whatever. Oh, but wait, you just said that if that kind of trauma happened to a person's head, that everything stops, no breathing, no heartbeat. So there would be no bruising either if it happened after the shot. It happened before the shot. She got bruises and such because that's the only time they come up. Bruises won't grow post-mortem. They don't move. They don't expand unless there's a heartbeat. So they happen beforehand, like right beforehand, of course.
Mm-hmm. So when they said that she called, was it the police to let them know that she was going to commit suicide, and so that this was in a park, a state park, so that they would know where to find her body.
Yes, and if she got herself there, how's the first thing she's going to say is, I don't know where I'm at, and I'm in a national park. You know, she wouldn't say that. She's not stupid. She knows where she would be. So that's kind of weird, strange at that point too. The other part of I don't know where I am could be in effect that she was way off the trail in a secluded area where only park rangers go, and there's like a bird habitat area with boxes for the birds and such. That's for the park ranger to use only, and it's like a mile away from the normal trails. Where everybody else walks the trails, they have no idea it's there. Nobody knows it's there. And so that might be the only thing as far as like, I'm not sure where I'm at. And of course, in that case, she would have said, I'm at this park and named it. I'm in the trails and I'm in the backwoods instead of just this blank thing, And
were there any cameras or witnesses that might be able to show that she was not alone? No,
typical less than mediocre for as far as, if the park rangers have a lot of authority, you would think that they would demand from the, the powers that be, that there would be cameras for surveillance because that whole area is known for high crime and problems. And one of the witnesses even said, we don't just go walking up on people because you never know who's going to be back there. You never know what they're going to be doing. And so even one of the witnesses said, the one who found her items said that he was scared to go over there, so anyway, I'm flabbergasted at the moment. So ask me another question or something.
Here, Mr. Francis confirms something we kind of already knew, but it's good to have it confirmed, right? That the redacted name in Micah's police complaints was, in fact, J.P. Miller.
I was going to ask, is it true that he admitted to deflating her tires and to stalking her and to putting a tracking device on her car? And if there was a tracking device on her car, could someone not have followed her to that place?
Exactly. So let's go backwards. Yes, very disappointed with the Myrtle Beach police and those areas and those kind of things. He deflated her tires, which is obviously illegal. It could be reckless endangerment. She could have crashed her car. And of course, he would have probably thought that was great and perhaps hoped that she died. Why didn't they arrest him? They knew who was doing this and they redacted his name at one point. Obviously, they knew who it was. And they had the devices turned in, multiple tracking devices, even put one tracking device on the woman that Micah was staying with, who was like a godmother to her and like a grandmother, put a tracking device on her car. She pressed charges against him, and
we're talking about that redacted name was JP, correct?
It was. So they already knew. Why didn't they arrest him? He's harassed her in front of the cops, and all they said was, you need to leave or I'm going to arrest you. You need to leave or I'm going to arrest you. What are you, a teacher at school hoping that the kid will cooperate? No, arrest him. Arrest him on the spot.
breaks my heart to say it, guys, but I think it's clear at this point. The system failed Micah, like it fails so many people. The system failed Micah Miller.
Is this guy been harassing her? Oh, he is? Okay, now you're under arrest. Simple. Do your job. Anyway,
but he was never arrested for harassing her, for deflating her tires, for putting trackers on her car.
And then he even admitted it.
Stalking her.
Admitted it. Didn't show up and arrest him.
And that's illegal. You stalk someone.
Yeah. And harassing, obviously. And he was told over and over, you know, stop this, stop this, stop this. We had to tell him, stop texting us during this whole process. Initially, he was bombing our phones. And we had to keep telling him, stop texting us. And of course, so we did he did, 3 times. And then we say, okay, we told you 3 times. Now we're going to, call cops and make a complaint that you are stalking us or that you are harassing us. And the cops were lackadaisical about that.
I did tell you that entire police force was under tarnished badge.
Tarnished badge. Oh, yeah. Speaking of tarnished badge, he had a fake badge that was not even from this state, a picture of it on his phone that he would show them when he gets pulled over because he doesn't ever drive the speed limit day in his life. And he would flash this badge that was from another state to get off from tickets.
Wow.
Do you,
he's not even related to them. It's not like
do you know if he had any kind of a criminal record outside and any problems with police before? Absolutely.
I feel so bad for Jesse Duplantis. Came and preached at the church, and he always does a background check because he doesn't want to go get affiliated with somebody who's this out of it. And John Paul put on the best acts. He got Micah to agree to cooperate through the sermon and everything, and he spent upwards to $15,000 to expunge everything and anything he could, so that when Jesse Duplantis did a background check, that it would look like he was not such a bad guy. But he was a felon. He was not even supposed to have weapons. And yeah, it's just so sad. He had a rap sheet.
I want to thank you for your time with us, and I will get with you regarding permanently joining the trauma triage team. You will be telling more of your of Micah's tale on Monday as well on our trauma triage team.
Thank you.
You have just this conversation with you has emotionally impacted me, and I know it has emotionally impacted the entire nation. If you want to achieve justice for Micah, please go to, can you say the website again?
JusticeForMicah.com.
And please donate to help facilitate an investigation into this.
Yeah, we need legal funds help.
Yeah, we will help you in any way we can.
He's a millionaire as far as land. He's got lots of land and such, and he can liquidate stuff. So
yeah, Well,
we're going to make sure with something. It's going to be a big. It's a fight.
Yeah, we're gonna help you. This is we really care about you deeply, and we want to thank you for
David,
coming on, and we look forward to having you on a regular basis. We look forward to talking to you again on Monday.
Gosh, this is just such a sad, freaking sad tale. So, guys, justice for Micah. The family needs help with legal funds to pursue justice for Micah. So when this video is put out, it's May 23rd, 2024. For the last week in May, this video, live streams, everything included, half of the revenue that this channel brings in is going to be donated to justiceformicah.com. Or please go there and make a donation yourself if you're able to do that. If you know somebody that's able to do that, send this along. This is an important cause. And my God, Micah Miller, that
she got the weapon for self-protection. She told me days beforehand, Dad, I really feel like I need a weapon for protection. And she knows how to use it.
A South Carolina church pastor is facing serious scrutiny after his wife's sudden death in a nearby state park. And as new details come to life about her final days, her husband is getting more and more attention. We're joined by Michael Francis, Micah's father, and her sister Sierra Francis to talk about the young woman's passing and where legal action might take them in the future. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, this is a Law and Crime legal alert. Google Incognito tracked users' browsing data without their knowledge, while Mass Tort Alliance, one of our legal sponsors, is helping users file for compensation due to Google misleading the privacy of their incognito browser. So if you've used Google Incognito anytime since 2016, you can start your claim in less than 10 questions at incognitoclaims.com/sidebar. What started out as this sudden and heartbreaking death announcement at the end of a church service has now taken all sorts of twists and turns, and it has morphed into a story that has captivated the nation. I'm talking about 30-year-old Micah Miller, who was found dead at Lumber River State Park just across the state line in North Carolina on April 27th. She had reportedly purchased a gun in the days before her apparent suicide from a pawn shop. That Sunday, her husband, 44-year-old John Paul Miller, announced his wife's death during a recent service at the church where he's a pastor, Solid Rock Church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And Miller announced, quote, "I got a call late last night that my wife has passed away. It was self-induced and it was up in North Carolina. You all pray for me and my kids and everybody. You all knew she wasn't well mentally and she needed medicine that was hard to get to her. I'm sure there will be more details to come, but keep her family in your prayers." And then Miller asked for people not to discuss his wife's death outside of the church, but as you can imagine, news spread like wildfire. And the woman's family has immediately become suspicious of this. Why? Well, John Paul Miller and his first wife, they divorced in 2015, and then he and Micah married in 2017. Micah's family says that John Paul, who's 14 years older than Micah, first met her when she was a member of his church youth group at age 14. Now, there have been accusations that he groomed her. Not totally clear what exactly that means, but we'll explore it. Now, Micah was also reportedly married previously to John Paul's friend, Jeremy. So you see these apparent connections. Okay, but now we fast forward, and it's our understanding, based on reporting, that Micah had filed for divorce from John Paul 6 months ago. It's also our understanding the divorce petition was withdrawn, but then a few days after that, John Paul filed for separate support and maintenance, financial support, because the couple were still legally married. Then Micah had also filed for separate support and maintenance. There was a scheduled hearing for next month, but of course, Micah died. Micah's family claims that in the days before her death, she filed for a no-contact order. And I believe that she was still pursuing divorce against John Paul. Now, police and the medical examiner have ruled Micah's death a suicide. And one of the ways that they have ruled that is not only based on the forensic evidence at the scene, but a 911 phone call that was placed by Micah to law enforcement in North Carolina gives a lot of insight into her apparent state of mind. So I warn you, this is really tough to hear.
Robeson County 911, what's the address of your emergency?
Hi, are you able to trace the location of my phone?
Let me see. You don't know where you're at?
A national park.
Tell me what's happened.
I'm about to kill myself, and I just want my family to know where to find me.
Okay, ma'am. Just listen to what I'm saying, okay? Let me make sure I got the exact location where you're at, okay? Just 1 minute.
We've now learned that the Robeson County Sheriff's Office is requesting that the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI investigate Micah's death. Whether the FBI is actually involved yet kind of remains unclear. It may be more of a jurisdictional issue about why they could be involved because of where she died on a state park out in North Carolina. But as I mentioned, Micah's family appears to be suspicious of all of this. And one of the things to note is that John Paul does have a criminal record. Research indicates that in 1998, Miller entered a no-contest plea in Horry County, South Carolina, to a charge of assault and battery of a high and aggravated nature, meaning that Miller did great bodily injury to someone or likely was going to injure someone. He was given 500 hours of community service, was put on probation for several years, and a 4-year prison sentence was suspended. In 2022, South Carolina court records indicate that Miller was pardoned. In 2000, out in Illinois, he apparently pled guilty to aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. In 2004, out in Illinois, it appears that Miller was charged with domestic battery, but the prosecutors seemed to decline to move forward with the case and were unable to find sentencing information for that case. Now, in one of her final posts on Facebook, Micah uploaded a selfie, and she uploaded the selfie with the caption, "When terrible, terrible, terrible things happen to you, you all know what I'm talking about. RPF, resting peace face." She included the hashtags still blessed and God is good. She also been posting videos on her social media talking about leaving abusive situations.
It doesn't matter what gender you are, abuse is abuse. And you are the bride of Christ. And my Bible says that he took all the abuse you could think of for you so that you didn't have to live that life of slavery and bondage and pain.
According to a friend, Micah had left for a different church other than Solid Rock. John Paul gave an interesting, perhaps the best word to describe it is an arguably strange eulogy, different eulogy at the Solid Rock Church, while family members held a different memorial service at the beach.
She'd get tourists to take our picture, and I say, okay, thank you. She said, oh, no, this isn't good. Give it back to them. And they do it again, you know. But she told me, she was so creative. Everything she did was so creative. What's the next picture? What's the next picture? She'd stop. We'd be on the way to like a show or something. She'd say, stop, I got to get a picture. I said, we're going to be late. She said, I don't care. What's the next picture? Next picture.
John Paul also said that he wanted so badly for her to be alive that he repeatedly tried to see her body and even tried to raise her from the dead. There were reports that Reverend Charles Randall fired Miller as Solid Rock's pastor, but Randall disputed that during a recent sermon, saying, quote, I have released him from ministerial functions for a minute to get some healing and some counseling and some guidance. You can't go through these things like this and just step right back on the same day. Family and friends have started using the hashtag Justice for Micah. Now, it's our understanding Micah's sister Sierra, who we're going to be speaking with in a minute, has filed a legal claim against both Miller and the church in connection with Micah's death. Court documents filed in Horry County Family Court accuse Solid Rock Church of colluding and conspiring with John Paul to defraud and deprive Micah. The Daily Mail also reported that Micah contacted the Myrtle Beach Police Department on April 8th, just weeks before her death, to report that she had seen a lewd photo of herself in a Facebook group and believed her estranged husband, John Paul Miller, had posted it. Well, after her death, Miller admitted that he did post the photo. In a letter obtained by News Nation, seemingly addressed to Micah, it reads, quote, I'm sorry for putting a picture of you on the internet. It was for less than 1 hour and immediately taken down. I was hurt that you were telling everyone horrible, intimate details of my past sin, and I just wanted to try and hurt you. Please forgive me. It was evil of me to do that. Micah had also reported back in March that she found a tracking device on her car at least twice and said that John Paul had her involuntarily committed to a hospital and stole her car while she was gone. Now, in a statement, John Paul Miller's lawyer, Russell Long, said, quote, it has come to light that Micah Miller struggled with mental illness, specifically bipolar disorder, which when not properly managed led to paranoid episodes and self-destructive behavior. Some reports made by her in the recent past are nonsensical. He also added that a ruling of suicide by law enforcement completely exonerates Pastor Miller of any wrongdoing. Well, I am joined right now by Micah's father, Michael Francis. Thank you so much for coming on. And before we even get started, I just have to say I am so sorry for your loss, your family's loss. And as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I know this can't be easy talking about this and having this amplified and everybody speaking about it. So I know this must be a very difficult time. So my heart goes out to you and your family, and really appreciate you taking the time to come here and talk a little bit more about it.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start off. How are you and the family doing right now?
We're struggling. You know, we're more united than ever as a family. You know, this is something that has really caused us to drop any little petty arguments or something and focus on what's important at this moment. So, you know, we have grieved off and on, but we've also been in fight mode off and on, as far as legally and, you know, and speaking out for Micah.
Let's talk about that, because I want to be very clear here. Despite the findings from law enforcement that Micah had died by her own hand, that the sheriff's office saying John Paul was not in Robeson County when Micah died, do you believe there is more to the story, correct?
Yes, it's there's a lot of details that they did not cover, and because it was equivalent in their eyes to previous self-inflicted wounds, I believe the law allows them to do less work. It does not prevent them from doing more work. And since there were multiple shell casings found and a live round found, it already didn't make much sense. So it would seem that they would automatically do a complete toxicology, not just blood alcohol, and a complete autopsy, which they did not do. And we're just devastated that they didn't, because John Paul rushed the cremation process. During the briefing, we pressed pretty hard for more information and such, and the sheriff's office was trying to compress the briefing for us, and then they gave us a flash drive. It doesn't sound like Micah during the 911 call. She's so slow and so, but then later there are, I haven't even heard them myself, honestly. I have someone who's going through all that for me and filtering the information, because otherwise, the more information I get that sounds off, the more furious I get, and I need to be able to focus and control my emotions. But there was screaming going on and such, and that's not something indicative of a self-inflicted. Sounds like a fight, and with the bruising on her hands and on her arm, scratches on her hands, indicating defensive wounds. So very frustrating.
When you say defensive wounds, is that something that was told to you by a medical professional when you talked about multiple casings there? Where did you get this information? And when you brought this information to law enforcement or brought it or mentioned to them, what did they say?
Okay, as far as finding out, the park ranger took us back to the scene and pointed out, here's where she would have been standing. Here's where the shell casings and the live round were, which also doesn't make sense. She knew how to use a weapon. She got the weapon for self-protection. She told me days beforehand, Dad, I really feel like I need a weapon for protection. And she knows how to use it. She's qualified. She's been through training. She's not going to charge the weapon and eject a live round. She already knows the first rule of gun use is knowing the condition of the gun. So we got the information about the shells. I did it directly from the park ranger, and then when we brought that up to law enforcement, they just said, well, they had no answer. They really just had no answer why, any kind of, not even a speculation. They didn't even say, well, she probably did this, probably did that. They just said, this is what we have. And there is what would be an apparent bullet hole in a tree, which I have a picture of. And they just didn't seem to put the effort forth. So we're very disappointed in that.
And the defensive wounds, was that from the park ranger too,
Okay.
Yeah.
No, we looked at her hands during the viewing. We took pictures of her from the viewing. It was the worst day of my life. And she had scratches on her arms on her hand. And the coroner in training had the chief coroner with her, but she spoke out and said, well, maybe that's from when they retrieved her from the water. And I said, okay, of course, maybe. Was there blood in those scratches and such? They had no answer. Very disappointing. So I basically said the scratches indicate some type of scuffle or something, because the area where she was, there was no trees or anything anyway. There was no trees in the water. There was nothing there that would have scratched her hands the way they were. This. So, it showed, it indicated that there was, some type of pressure, that's where the bruise was. And just,
Well, Michael, here's the thing. And I hate to ask you this, and I know it must be difficult to revisit it, but when you mentioned the 911 phone call, when that came out, I think a lot of people who were suspecting there might be something there, they were convinced that that was the end of the story. When you mentioned that 911 phone call, you said there's something about the way that Micah sounded on the phone that sounded odd to you. What do you mean by
absolutely.
that?
Very slow speech. She's a very happy-go-lucky excitable person. And it was too slow. It was very slow. It was metered. It could have been done with an AI type of previous recordings where somebody would have had those words from her previously, or, whatever. And so it just doesn't make sense that he wouldn't go up there.
Do you have a theory as to what happened? Because authorities are saying, they crossed out his alibi of where he was. Do you have a theory as to what happened? And again, I know this is sensitive, so if you don't want to share it, I understand. But do you have a theory as to what you believe happened to your daughter?
Okay, well, I'll share what we spoke to about with the authorities, the sheriff in North Carolina. Also, as far as with his location, we've seen pictures of his truck. It had dark windows. Was it even him in there? Where's pictures of him physically there? We haven't seen those. They've not been produced. If someone else has them, we would like to see them to prove that he was there, because otherwise it could be anybody in that truck. So the theory would be that because she had multiple tracking devices put on her car previously, that she was followed out to the park or forced to go out to the park, and they either follow her out there, or there's no reason for her to go out there. That's the main point as well. She's never been out there. We don't go up there. It's not a family spot. And she was off the trail enough into a park ranger only area that nobody knows about. And so the theory would be that she was either tracked, and then they said, well, we didn't find a tracking device. Well, they could have removed it at the park. When the car was at the park and then it was collected by the authorities, they didn't check for a tracker, which blew my mind. They said, oh, we have all the evidence and everything. We asked them, was there a tracker on her car? And they said, well, we didn't check. And we were flabbergasted. This happened over and over during that interview. Why didn't you check that? We know that there was 3 or 4 trackers put on her vehicles. Why wouldn't you check to see if she was followed? They said, oh, there's no cameras, but we know she wasn't followed. Her car is just out here. And I said, well, there's no trackers. They said no tracker. I said, well, they could have removed it after they did the deed. So then Micah's mother, Angelita, she said, pretend this is Micah's hand. And she asked me, grab this hand. And then she pulled it up, and said, it looks like someone squeezed her hand and raised it up and shot. And there are defensive wounds from it and such. And that's the general idea of our theory, that somebody crushed her hand to hold the gun up to her head while she's fighting. Either them or someone else held her other hand or her other arm back, because there's bruising on it from squeezing. And they forced it to look like that was self-inflicted. And a couple of rounds went off during the scuffle. One ejected was live, and then it finally happened the way they would want it to happen. And then dumped her in the water, probably 40 meters away from where the shell casings in the gun was found. The water doesn't flow there. It's a slough. It's still. It just sinks. And it actually flows when it sinks, when it recesses, it goes the other direction from where she was found. So her body, even if it was put in the water right there, would not have flowed the direction where she was found. It would flow the other way. So it would be possible that the incident occurred right there, and the shell casings, and then the gun was dumped in the water right there. And then she was carried farther, 40 meters back, into a little bit more secluded area where she was found.
So Sierra Francis now joins the conversation. This is Micah's sister. Sierra, thank you so much for coming on. As I told your father, I just want to say again, I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry for what you and your family are going through. Our hearts go out to you guys. And again, really appreciate you taking the time and being so generous with your time to come on and talk a little bit more about this. So I've already spoken to your father a lot about what you guys believe might have happened here. I want to talk to you about this legal claim that you have filed against Mr. Miller and the church. Walk us through what that claim is and what you're hoping to get from that.
As far as the legal side of things, I don't have, perfect details of everything. I'm just trying to pick up where Micah left off and make sure that justice is served and that we are able to, remain over her estate and make sure that it is used or allotted in the way that she would have wanted it to.
Do you know anything about the FBI being a part of this investigation now? Were you told anything about that, what they might be looking into?
So we are aware that Robeson County did come out and say that the FBI is involved, but as far as, what they're investigating and the extent of their involvement, the family's not sure.
Okay. I wanted to ask you this, both of you this. So look, the main argument, and it's being put forward by Mr. Miller, and what we've seen is Micah, they say, had suffered from mental illness. Do you know anything about that? Anything you could tell us about that? Because one of the things that Mr. Miller has said is he had this power of attorney set up for that reason. What can you tell us about what Micah might have been going through?
So before Micah married John Paul, she had no signs, no history, no indications of mental illness at all.
And why did she presumably agree to a power of attorney? Usually the person who sets up would have to agree to it and sign to it.
He had every way to control her, and he was very good at manipulating the situation.
And she thought that he would be doing the right thing. And she wanted to trust that Mr. Miller Jr. was actually doing the right thing for them until she got away from him and had more time when she spent more time with us to peel off some of those layers and realize what was going on. And then she started becoming herself again and got a job and everything else and was doing fine and was happy-go-lucky self again, excited about the future, and which is something he did not like. Just very terrible.
There are these allegations that he groomed her. What do we mean by that?
He had his sights set on her from a very young age. I would guess probably 14 years old, 14 or 15 when we first came to the church. And he made sure that he kept her exactly where he wanted her to the point of who she married, what job she picked up after she was, 18. He got her married, and then he made her his secretary and his babysitter and his let's go to lunch person and, oh, you're so beautiful.
And then when she was married, same thing, best friends with her husband, her previous husband, and manipulated the situation where he could have him doing something because he was his right-hand man and then spend time with Micah alone, which is very inappropriate.
And to be clear about that, are you alleging that he engaged in criminal contact with Micah? And if so, again, my understanding is there's no time bar in South Carolina to bring charges. Is this something that you're speaking with about authorities with?
I don't think he physically had a relationship with her until after she had already been married to Jeremy.
I wanted to ask you about something else. And this goes back to that idea of why he says, and correct me if I'm wrong, why he says he had to set up the power of attorney. He was concerned about whether Micah would be taking money, because there was this allegation that Micah was a suspect in the theft of $1,200 in donations for the Solid Rock, this missionary efforts. I understand you want to clear the record up on that.
That was investigated. I have seen, police excerpts on that, and from what I've seen, to best of my knowledge, it said that that was just a domestic dispute, and there was no criminal charges to be filed.
Okay, and also, as far as the amount that was mentioned, Micah was having trouble with the websites releasing the money to her from the donations,
such as Venmo or stuff like that.
Right. They were holding on to those funds, as they do, for like the 3-day period or whatever, gaining interest. And so during that period where the money didn't show up yet, he was accusing her of stealing that money. And then after the fact, after she's passed, all the money showed back in except 1 penny.
Not to mention that the money wasn't money that was donated and she was stealing it. This money was, hey, I've put $600 out of my pocket with the intention of, hey, I will be reimbursed from this, because that's what she was told. Hey, spend your $600 to purchase, all the donuts that you're using for fundraising. It's a charity. We'll make sure we reimburse you. So it's not even stealing. It's reimbursement for what she's already put into.
Right.
And before I let you go, I have to ask you about this letter that came out that he had seemingly apologized to Micah for what he said was releasing a nude photograph of her on the internet. What was your reaction to that letter?
He's a faker.
Yeah.
He likes to Band-Aid everything so he can still control and manipulate people.
I told him straight up, because of his behavior before, okay, now go ahead and go cry in front of your church and apologize like you always do. Mm-hmm. And he didn't during the sermon and his bombshell drop at the last point. He didn't do his fake sniveling, crying, fake stuff. He just, until later. But he would, numerous times, he would go in front of the church and say, I'm sorry, I did this and I did that. I'm sorry. If you don't want me to be the pastor, I'll leave. And they would say, oh, no, you do such a great job. And then it would happen again and again.
Right.
And if they did stand up against him, he would threaten them with removing them from the church, or he would just straight out remove them in front of everybody. And then later in sermons said, oh, well, they just left for no reason. I don't know why they left.
Michael Sierra.
I don't know anything that comes out of his mouth. It's all backwards.
Well, Michael Sierra, here's what I wanted to ask you. This is going to be an ongoing discussion. And I was hoping, and first of all, thank you for being so forthcoming to come on to explain this, give your perspective on what's happening. As this progresses, can we keep an open line, and can you come back on and let us know any updates that are happening on your end? We would really appreciate it, because I think a lot of people have questions about this.
Sure. As long as our attorneys are in agreement and such, and we will keep it open, and most likely that would be us.
Okay, so listen, again, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate this. And again, my heart goes out to you and your family about this loss, and I'm so sorry for what you're going through. But again, really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.